A gentle snowfall blanketed Moscow as the city settled into a strange, haunting silence. The cold wind swept through Red Square, whispering tales of power, betrayal, and long-forgotten alliances. The Russian capital, wrapped in ice and mystery, stood as both a battlefield and a witness to history in the making. Above the clouds, slicing through the gray sky, the presidential jet glided toward the heart of this frozen empire. Inside the aircraft, Captain Ibrahim Traore sat alone by the window. His gaze locked on the endless white stretching beneath him. The world outside was cold, unwelcoming, but inside him, a fire burned quietly. He wasn't just a soldier. He wasn't just a leader. He was a man carrying the weight of a nation on his shoulders, a nation whose enemies were no longer hiding in the shadows. His eyes didn't flinch. His hands remained steady. Behind them lay Burkina Faso, scarred but unbroken. Ahead waited Moscow, a city that had hosted kings, crushed empires, and now opened its doors to a man who defied them all. The contrast was stark. Icy winds of the Kremlin versus the simmering heat of African resistance. One city built on centuries of cold diplomacy, one man fueled by fresh wounds and unshaken resolve. Captain Traoré wasn't just arriving in Moscow. He was bringing with him a storm of his own. Before the jet ever left the tarmac of Ouagadougou, something far deeper had already taken flight. In the days leading up to the visit, Captain Ibrahim Traore withdrew from the noise of political chatter and media speculation. Instead, he turned inward, grounding himself in prayer, reflection, and resolve. This was not just preparation, it was purification. He understood that stepping onto Russian soil would mean stepping onto a new stage in the global power game, and every move had to be deliberate. This was no ceremonial handshake, no photo-op diplomacy. The mission was crystal clear. Africa would no longer bow. The age of dependency was over. His presence in Moscow was a statement etched in fire, declaring Burkina Faso's refusal to be another pawn in someone else's war. He came to forge alliances, yes, but only on equal footing. His team mirrored his discipline. The delegation was hand-picked, not for status, but for purpose. Military strategists, economic advisors, energy experts, each one briefed to the finest detail. Every meeting had an objective. Every agreement would be measured by sovereignty, not charity. Even their arrival time was calculated. Not too early, not too late, just enough to remind the world that this wasn't business as usual. Captain Traoré wasn't just visiting Moscow. He was challenging the global order, and he was ready. The presidential jet touched down on Moscow's icy runway, its sleek body slicing through the mist like a blade through fog. The engines powered down, and the stairs lowered with a hiss. At the foot of the aircraft, a formal Russian military reception awaited. Officers in crisp uniforms, diplomats standing tall, cameras poised to capture history in motion. Captain Ibrahim Traore descended with quiet authority, his coat catching the breeze, his eyes scanning the crowd with measured calm. Ouattara walked a few steps behind him, expression unreadable but watchful. The handshake line began, each gesture, each nod, choreographed down to the second. But then, it happened. One Russian officer, standing rigidly near the front of the welcoming formation, offered no salute. His posture remained stiff, his eyes averted, not in protest, but in defiance cloaked as formality. The moment passed in mere seconds, but its echo was deafening. Traoré didn't flinch. His stride never broke. But beneath the silence, a current of tension rippled through the cold. Ouattara saw it. The entire Burkina delegation noticed. Kremlin observers exchanged brief glances. Even the intelligence personnel, trained to remain detached, took note. Nothing was said. No correction was issued. But in the world of geopolitics, such slights aren't forgotten. They're recorded, studied, and answered. This wasn't just a reception anymore. It was a battlefield of gestures, and the first shot had already been fired. Inside the Kremlin, the walls are thick, but not deaf. Within minutes of the tarmac incident, Russian intelligence had already reviewed the footage, frame by frame. The moment the officer failed to salute Captain Ibrahim Traore was no longer just a blink in real time. It had become a focal point on a dozen monitors, analyzed from every angle. It reached the top quickly. President Vladimir Putin, seated in his private office, was handed a secure tablet. No words were needed. He watched the short clip in silence. Once, then again. His face remained unreadable, the same calm mask he wore whether negotiating arms deals or reading battlefield reports. But behind the stillness, something stirred. He set the tablet down with deliberate care and looked at the aide standing nearby. "Unacceptable," he said simply. "Handle it." There was no fury in his tone, no raised voice or slamming fist. But the weight of those two words carried the full force of the Russian state. The aide nodded and disappeared. No public statement was issued, no dramatic reprimand broadcast to the world. That wasn't Putin's style. This was a matter of quiet power, of intent spoken through action, not headlines. The Kremlin would not let this pass, not because of optics, but because in diplomacy, small gestures reveal the true posture of nations, and Russia had no intention of being seen as disrespectful, especially to a man like Traoré. Captain Ibrahim Traore didn't flinch. The moment of disrespect on the tarmac, brief, sharp, and witnessed by many, passed over him like the cold Moscow wind. Not a change in expression, not a word spoken. To the outside world, it was as if he hadn't even noticed. But those who knew him understood. He noticed everything. Inside the embassy residence that evening, Ouattara, one of his closest advisors, finally broke the silence. "Captain," he said, his voice low but firm, "what that officer did, it wasn't just disrespect, it was a message." Traoré turned, setting down a glass of warm tea. He didn't look angry, only calm. Too calm. "Let them speak with gestures," he replied. "We will speak with outcomes." Ouattara frowned, confused. "You don't want to respond?" "I already have," Traoré said, standing tall. "By not reacting in anger, I've shown them our strength isn't emotional, it's strategic. If they expected a scene, they'll be disappointed. We are not here to demand respect. We are here to command it through our actions." In that moment, Ouattara understood. Traoré's silence wasn't submission. It was dominance in its most disciplined form. This was a man who led with more than weapons. He led with a philosophy. True strength doesn't need to shout. It simply moves forward and lets the world adjust. The following day, a shift in the air was palpable. What had begun as a cold and subtle affront suddenly took on an entirely new tone. Captain Ibrahim Traoré received an unexpected invitation, a revised ceremony at the iconic Red Square. This was no ordinary welcome, it was a calculated correction. As Traoré and his delegation entered the historic square, the atmosphere was charged with solemnity and grandeur. Rows of Russian military personnel stood at attention, their crisp uniforms gleaming under the morning sun. The entire formation presented a full military salute, sharp, synchronized, and unmistakably sincere. For those watching, the message was clear. Respect was restored. Cameras from across the world caught every moment. The broadcast showed Traoré standing firm, eyes steady, absorbing the moment with quiet dignity. This was more than ceremony, it was symbolism at its most powerful. Then came the official act. The Russian commander stepped forward and read aloud a formal apology. His voice echoed across the square, a public admission of fault and a pledge to uphold the highest diplomatic respect going forward. The apology document was then handed directly to Traoré, a tangible symbol of recognition and reconciliation. In that moment, the message resonated deeply. The cold winds of Moscow had shifted, replaced by a warmth born of respect, earned through patience, strength, and unwavering resolve. The correction at Red Square was more than protocol. It was a statement of Africa's rising dignity on the world stage. Behind the imposing doors of the Kremlin, away from the eyes of the world, Captain Ibrahim Traore and President Vladimir Putin sat face to face in a room thick with quiet tension. This was the moment where diplomacy shed its public mask and revealed the true weight of respect and power. Putin, composed yet resolute, broke the silence. He offered Traoré a clear gesture of accountability, the dismissal of the Russian officer who had failed to salute. It was a symbolic move, one meant to demonstrate Russia's recognition of the mistake and its willingness to make amends. But Traoré, embodying the profound strength that had carried him this far, declined the offer. His reply was measured, rooted not in anger or desire for retribution, but in a deeper philosophy. "My fight is not for vengeance," he said, "but for the honor of my people, for the dignity of my nation." He made it clear that his leadership sought to rise above petty retaliation. Instead, Traoré focused on building bridges, strong ones forged from respect, understanding, and mutual recognition of sovereignty. This was a conversation about much more than a single incident. It was a statement of intent for the future, relationship between their nations. Putin nodded in understanding. In that room, two powerful leaders exchanged not just words, but a shared respect, setting a new tone that extended far beyond Moscow's walls. As news of the Moscow incident and its resolution spread, headlines lit up across West Africa like wildfire. Media outlets from Dakar to Lagos echoed the story. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's calm yet unwavering stance became the centerpiece of countless discussions. It wasn't just about a diplomatic slight. It was about the way Traoré handled it, with a balance of dignity and quiet strength that resonated deeply with many. Public perception shifted almost overnight. Traoré was no longer seen simply as a military leader or a politician. He emerged as a symbol of a new kind of African leadership, one rooted in patience, resilience, and unwavering respect for his nation's honor. People admired his refusal to stoop to petty retaliation, recognizing instead the power in measured restraint. Among the younger generation, this moment sparked a subtle but powerful cultural shift. For years, many had equated leadership with loud declarations and flashy displays of power. But Traoré's example began to inspire a fresh perspective, one that valued the strength in silent resolve, the courage to hold one's ground without sacrificing dignity. Across social media, cafes and community gatherings, conversations about leadership changed. Quiet dignity became a virtue to aspire to. And in this way, Traoré's actions in Moscow rippled far beyond diplomacy, planting seeds of a new ethos in the hearts of a continent ready for change. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's return to Burkina Faso was met with a quiet yet deeply respectful reception. There were no grand parades or loud fanfare, but the atmosphere was thick with pride and inspiration. His people understood that true leadership often speaks loudest through humble strength, and his homecoming reflected that very sentiment as Traoré stepped onto the tarmac. A lone soldier stood at attention and saluted him without hesitation, an unspoken tribute that echoed the respect earned not just in Moscow, but across the continent. This simple gesture captured the essence of Traoré's legacy, honor earned through steadfast composure and principled action. The diplomatic outcomes of the visit soon became clear. The formal apology from Russia was not just a statement on paper. It was a recognition of Burkina Faso's dignity and sovereignty. Beyond this symbolic victory, important defense and trade agreements were signed, strengthening the nation's strategic partnerships and economic future. Most importantly, the protocol honor secured during this trip sent a powerful message to the international community. Burkina Faso, under Traoré's leadership, would no longer tolerate disrespect or undermining of its sovereignty. This mission was a turning point, cementing Traoré's legacy at home as a leader who elevated his country's standing through calm determination and strategic diplomacy. The nation looked on with renewed hope, inspired by a leader who embodied strength, respect, and vision. Long after Captain Ibrahim Traoré returned home, the impact of his visit to Moscow continued to ripple through Burkina Faso and beyond. In IQ, classrooms across the country, teachers shared the story with young students, explaining how a single moment of quiet strength could change the course of history. Children listened wide-eyed, absorbing the lesson that true power often lies not in loud words or forceful acts, but in dignity and unwavering presence. The story sparked conversations far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Across Africa, in town halls, universities, and coffee shops, people debated the meaning of diplomacy and leadership. What did it mean for a nation to stand its ground with calm conviction? How could respect be demanded without aggression? These discussions reshaped how many Africans viewed power, less as domination, and more as a balanced dance of respect, strategy, and cultural pride. Traoré became more than just a leader. He became a symbol of a new Africa. His story was not one of confrontation or bitterness, but of silent strength that commands attention and demands respect. In a world where loud voices often drown out wisdom, Traoré's example reminded many that presence itself can be the most powerful form of influence. His legacy endures in the quiet dignity of leaders who understand that respect, once earned, can never be taken away. As the story of Captain Ibrahim Traoré's visit to Moscow settled into history, one moment stood out as a lasting lesson. During a quiet conversation with a young schoolgirl in Burkina Faso, Traoré shared a simple truth. Sometimes respect isn't something you receive, it's something you teach. This profound statement captured the essence of his journey and the spirit behind his restraint and resolve. Meanwhile, back in Moscow, President Putin marked the event with a subtle yet meaningful gesture. A commemorative plaque was quietly installed in the protocol wing of Red Square, symbolizing a mutual acknowledgement, not just of the incident, but of the importance of respect and honor in international relations. It was a reminder that posture, dignity, and presence can speak louder than politics or power plays. The incident evolved beyond a diplomatic hiccup into a global lesson on leadership and grace under pressure. Across continents, leaders and citizens alike reflected on what it truly means to represent a nation, not just through words or force, but through unwavering dignity. At the closing of a major international summit, a powerful declaration echoed, "Africa's dignity will never be negotiated, only revealed." These words, inspired by Traoré's calm defiance and quiet strength, resonated as a timeless call for respect and honor, values that transcend borders and politics, shaping the future of diplomacy for generations to come.